Welcome to the ITSM Practice Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the ITSM Practice Podcast. I'm Luigi Ferri, and today we are unpacking the secrets of workplace motivation with an ITIL master, Stefano. He'll draw on the legendary work of Herzberg to show us how ITIL can be leveraged to create environments that foster high performance and satisfaction. Whether you are a manager or team member, these insights will help you cultivate a thriving and motivated workplace. Prepare, aim, launch.
Hi everyone, thank you all for listening, and thank you Luigi for having me on your podcast. My name is Stefano, I'm a certified ITIL Master and Prince 2 Practitioner, and on today's show I'd like to talk about one of the most interesting topics in workforce management. That is, what motivates people in the workplace, and more specifically, what makes them work better and achieve higher performance while being happy with the job and not burnt out. This topic has been studied at length by so many psychologists. Nonetheless, for the most part, their findings and theories seem to have had very little influence on the actual business practice. This is why when I teach about this, I like to stick to the classics, which I would also do today by talking about the work of Frederick Herzberg, one of the most preeminent occupational psychologists in the 20th century. During the 50s and 60s, Herzberg collected loads of self-reported data on workplace morale from thousands of workers of all kinds, men and women, young and old, from several countries and doing many different jobs. He asked them which factors contributed the most to their satisfaction and which contributed the most to their dissatisfaction. And what did he find? Well, his main finding was that satisfaction and dissatisfaction seemed to be fairly independent from each other. In other words, there were factors that caused lots of satisfaction when they were present, but very little dissatisfaction when they weren't there, and vice versa. That's why the theory he proposed, in order to explain these findings, became famous as the two-factor theory. Now, all this may seem a bit counterintuitive. Let's make it more obvious with a couple of examples. Say an employee doing a boring job is dissatisfied with their low salary. If we increase it to the industry standard, or even above it, we don't automatically get a happy employee. They'll still find their job boring. We just made them less miserable, but not enthusiastic either. They're now neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. After all, don't we always say that money can't buy happiness? On the other hand, recognition is a driver of satisfaction. A worker whose successes are pointed at and celebrated does their job more enthusiastically. But if an employee has a terrible salary and can't bring home enough money to live decently, we could make them the employee of the month for 1 year straight, but we wouldn't make a dent on the causes of their dissatisfaction. At best, we'll get someone who is both very satisfied thanks to the high recognition, but also very dissatisfied due to poor pay. Another thing that Herzberg found is that all main drivers of satisfaction had to do with motivation. In other words, a satisfied employee is a motivated employee, one that does their job with enthusiasm and care, leading to great performance. On the opposite side, all main drivers of dissatisfaction had nothing to do with motivation, meaning that a dissatisfied employee can still deliver high-quality work until, however, they flee somewhere else, maybe when you need them the most. In other words, if you want to have a happy employee who stays loyal to their company, you have to tackle two different challenges: how to motivate them, that is to say, how to make them passionate about the work, but also how to make sure they're not frustrated. This is why Herzberg talks about motivating factors and hygiene factors, this latter being the ones that prevent or remove dissatisfaction. The term hygiene might be confusing. In my classes, I usually say that you can think of it just like literal hygiene. Just like living in a house without mold or rotten stuff doesn't make you super energetic or super happy, but it prevents you from getting sick and feeling miserable, so do hygiene factors in the workplace. They don't motivate people, but it keeps them in a healthy relationship with their employer. Now, we haven't seen yet what these motivating and hygiene factors are. Let's start with the former. How do we motivate an employee? Herzberg isolated 5 main elements. The first is intrinsic interest. This means you have to give an employee challenging tasks, but also tasks that are aligned with their values and sense of meaning. The second and third are achievement and recognition. This means giving people realistic goals and celebrating their successes. The fourth and fifth are responsibility and advancement. You have to entrust employees with responsibilities and gradually increase them as they grow professionally. This is what motivates your workforce to do their jobs and do them well. But now, what are the hygiene factors instead? Well, there's many. Some have to do with money, like salary and fringe benefits. Some are about health and work-life balance, like working conditions, or the right not to be bothered when off work. And some have to do with company policies and with personal relationships in the workplace, like for instance the relationships with administrators, supervisors and peers. These, by the way, are the most impactful ones. These factors, per Herzberg, tend to do little about whether someone is passionate about the job. In other words, having an obnoxious boss, having to comply with frustrating company policies, having a low salary, don't usually impact how much someone loves what they do and how much care they put into the quality of their work. But that's only true until it isn't. At some point, people will quit, or quiet quit, or at the very least, kind of give up and stop caring just out of exasperation. And that's why Herzberg himself recommended to ensure high levels of hygiene first and foremost. Now, there could be so much more to say about the two-factor theory. For instance, some later scholars found out that hygiene factors, and especially the social one, actually tend to increase motivation, and that not all employees are motivated by the same things. Also, as you can imagine, there are interplays between factors. For example, a raise or a bonus can be seen as a form of recognition, and therefore become a motivating factor. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. You'll find Herzberg's own summary of his theory in the show notes, along with another study critiquing some of his findings. If you'd like to have a chat about it, feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn. You'll also find the link to my profile in the show notes. Again, I'm Stefano, a service management trainer, and this has been an episode of the ITSM Practice Podcast, where we talked about what to do to motivate and retain your workforce. Thank you again for listening. Until next time.